point of this really is to give you guys a little bit more background and color around basic energy, which is electrosurgery. We have hopefully some tips and tricks, some best practices that, all told, lead to better patient safety, and that's what counts, obviously. But there's a little bit of background. If I start to get a little boring, let me know. But I think it's kind of nice to have a little foundation of knowledge on some of these different modalities and energy. Like when a surgeon wants to do desiccation or fulguration or something like that, what does that mean, right? What are these things actually doing? We can kind of get into that with this and give you a little bit more color on it. Can you guys see this okay?
Yeah.
I got as bright as it goes, sorry. So that's our Medtronic mission. That's kind of our marketing. We're all about patient safety, patient health, and that's actually what brings us to Valley Lab. Valley Lab is an old name you're probably familiar with. You've heard Valley Lab. It's synonymous with electrosurgery. They're the ones that pioneered the electrosurgical generators and a lot of that safety that's now come about and made electrosurgery so much safer for patients. But yeah. We love that name. We're Medtronic, we're Covidien, but we're also Valley Lab. We're not giving up on that. It still says it right on the generator. So what we'll cover, basic principles of electrosurgery, monopolar basics, bipolar, and then some injury prevention like I was talking about. Okay, so this is a very simple graphic, but it kind of represents what we've got going on in the room right now, right? You've got a patient on the table, you've got an ESU, you've got a pad, and you've got a Bovie. That's a complete circuit. So there's four key terms that we're talking about with basic surgery. There's current, circuit, impedance, and voltage. So that current is actually the flow of energy through that entire circuit. Circuit is the pathway by which it can go through, right? Impedance is any kind of resistance that it might encounter. In this case, when we're talking about impedance, we're talking about the patient themselves. Take, for instance, different tissue examples, like thin vascular tissue, not a lot of impedance, right? Not a lot of resistance. You can go through that with a Bovie pretty easily. Bone, on the other hand, totally different story, right? Very different. So, and then voltage. When they tell you to turn the power up, that voltage increase is what's driving that flow of energy through the circuit. The cheesy analogy, that just seems to stick, is a race car track. So the track itself is the circuit, right? The cars are the current, that's the flow going around. And then the impedance in that case might be wind, drag, whatever that might slow a race car down. And then voltage is the engine driving it around. So same type of principles apply. So people always ask, or at least I thought about it when I was learning, how come we don't get electrocuted when we're doing this, right? I mean, think about it. We're taking an ESU generator and we're using electrical energy to a patient. Why? What's the difference? Why aren't they getting electrocuted? It comes down to frequency. So electrosurgery operates on a different frequency than what would cause neuromuscular stimulation, so electrocution. So we kind of operate within this area right here. It's 200 kilohertz to 3.3 megahertz. And that's kind of that fine line. The different areas on this spectrum include like AM radio is on that spectrum, that's way over here. Television operates on the same spectrum further out, it's a tighter spectrum, and then over here are household appliances, we're kind of right here. So kind of interesting, but that's why that works. So I've talked about Valley Lab. This is that history, right? So 1967, company's founded as a medical products distributor rather, but soon begins developing first in electrosurgical products. So in 1968, we get our first portable solid-state electrosurgical generator. And then from there, we developed the Bovie. the grounding pad, which is huge, obviously. That's a big deal. 1981. Then 1999, we come to market with things like ligature, which changed the game completely. So this is that progression. 2008, we come out with this electrosurgical pencil. I'll go over it in a second. This is our Valley Lab pencil. This is a different Bovie pencil than the standard thing out there. And then, of course, 2016 is when we come out with this. So, long progression, long history, patient safety, just developing technology that is safer for the patient and gives you better clinical outcomes. Some monopolar. So this gets to some of the basics of monopolar surgery. So what we're looking at here is the patient grounding pad. To complete that circuit, you have two electrodes, two active electrodes, right? One is the one that they're using on the patient, the Bovie itself. The other electrode, even though it's very different, we don't think of it as an electrode, but it is the pad. And that completes the circuit, right? So how come we deliver electrical energy or surgical, clinical, whatever, I'm blanking on the word, but you know what I mean. How come on the Bovie side, we're able to deliver that energy and see a clinical effect, but on the pad side, not? Well, it comes down to surface area. So we're focusing all of that energy from the machine into one little area of the Bovie, right here. Whereas the pad has this larger area, so because of that larger pad surface area, it's not narrowing the energy delivery, so it makes it safe. So of course, you know, Bovie tips vary in how much surface area they take up. We have those fine needle point ones that deliver energy to a very focused area, and then the ball electrodes kind of deliver a little bit larger area of energy. But yeah, that's kind of how that works. I was going to do a quick demo. You're probably wondering why I brought the lemon.
See,
That is
Jared?
crazy.
Yeah, I told you.
On the phone, I was like, no, you're just
You
not
didn't
pushing
believe-
it enough.
I knew you were like you were doubting
I
me.
was doubting you a little bit, I have to say, but that is crazy.
Oh, Jerry?
That doesn't
Sorry,
work. What's that?
Because actually there's two monopolar plugins.
Oh, you're right, yeah. And actually we can, yeah, we're actually using this side of the point. So this would be where you plug your standard Bovie. On monopolar too, we can accept this pencil, which I will talk about in a little bit, but this is that Valley Lab one. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take our pad, we're gonna pretend the lemon is our patient. We're gonna wrap that around there like that. One cool thing about this pencil is I can adjust the power from here.
Oh.
They sort of control freak surgeons,
Nice.
which are they all control freaks probably. They like that. Let's see if we have enough power. Oh yeah. There we go. He's happy, right?
Happy smile.
So that's how it works. I mean, nothing crazy about that, right? However, I was talking about a second ago, how come we deliver effect with this side but not that side? Well, it comes down to surface area. Now if I put this in, let's go from over here. If I put this in, all of a sudden I can make the grounding pad the active electrode.
Wow.
So this gets back to the safety of pads and why you gotta have that good surface area, because this can quickly turn into the active electrode and burn a patient.
Wow.
Unfortunately, what we have, and I've disabled it, but by exit demo mode, we get this warning, right? If this isn't plugged in and we're not getting good contact quality, this is where it sucks to be a little area like me. You can see it went away. So it's monitoring that pad contact quality and making sure that you have ample surface area and you're not going to get patient burn.
I remember when they said not to put it on the hairy. Is it okay to put it in the hairy?
So yeah, that's part of this.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
we'll get to it. Yeah, yeah. This would not be an ideal spot unless you shave it.
Okay.
So we will talk about that. But anyway, you can see as I start to pull it off, it reads that. So that was one of those pioneering things that Valley Lab developed, was constant pad monitoring, contact quality monitoring. So that's a built-in technology now that we don't have to worry about. So this whole scenario where the burned lemon shouldn't happen. Settings. So knowing the basics. So what's the difference between cut and coag, right? So two functions, yellow cut, blue coag. Does anybody know why they're given yellow? It's kind of a fun fact. No? Okay. The guy that worked for Valley Lab, I guess he was a graduate of Michigan University. Blue and yellow colors. Yeah.
Oh.
So that's why he picked that. Anyway. So,
Yeah, it should be red.
what's that?
We read it, what?
Red and black?
Yeah, that would make more sense.
Yeah, kind of, right? Could be.
Black or coag.
Yeah, red for cut, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense to me too.
I'll search it up. It's my suggestion for that.
Yeah, San Diego State fans would like that, right? Red and black, I think they are. So what's the difference between cut and coag? So they operate at different voltages, which is the biggest difference. I personally, when I first learned this, I thought it was counterintuitive that cut was at a lower voltage, but it actually is. It operates at a much lower voltage than coag. But it has a very different duty cycle. You can see those waves. It takes no breaks. That means the energy delivery that's happening during that duty cycle is constant. It's 100%. It's just constantly delivering the energy at a low voltage. So that's why you get that nice like cut-like effect. But the downside of that is if it's not delivering a lot of voltage and not heating up as much, you're not going to get the hemostasis. So that's why we kick it over to coag when we want some of that hemostatic effect. And what it's doing in coag is it's blasting with less voltage, but it's actually a different duty cycle. It's pausing in between. So you get a burst and then a pause. So it allows it to heat up and create that thermal spread. So, and then Valley Lab and Blend are different. So Blend is like 50-50. Blend is based on a cut functionality. So if you switch it to Blend, which I can do right here. Anyway, it would be under here. So right now it's set to pure. I almost don't want to change it because changing it back is going to be a pain, right? But that's where I would adjust to Blend because Blend is a function of cut. Now the Valley Lab mode is actually a function of coag, but we'll get into that in a second. So they're different. A lot of people confuse the two. They're like, oh, Valley Lab is like Blend. It's not really. So this is what I was talking about, the thermal spread. These are the differences, right? You can kind of see with pure cut, you're just going right through the tissue. You're not getting a lot of thermal spread. Whereas Blend gives you a little mix, and then coag, definitely darker thermal spread, more hemostasis, controlling the bleeding. And then this is what I was just speaking to, the Blend versus Valley Lab. So there's actually a third button on here. That's what that Valley Lab mode is. So what it does is, because it's a coag-based energy, it gives you that hemostatic effect. However, there's an algorithm within it that gives you better dissection as well. So you're going to get that cut-like dissection with it, but you're also going to get the hemostasis. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. They like it in plastics and different areas where they're concerned about that thermal spread too. Because pure coag, you're getting a lot of tissue damage, a lot of thermal spread. This controls the bleeding with less of that. You can kind of see this is the traditional coag. It drags through, but you don't really get that dissection. Whereas the Valley Lab mode, you're getting the nice open dissection, but you're also getting the hemostasis. So. And then electrosurgery basics. This is kind of a basic thing. It's like the longer you apply energy to tissue, the more damage it's going to do, right? It's a direct ratio. So these are a couple of the different modalities. So like this one, let's see, vaporization. You can see it kind of creates you don't even touch the tip of it. It actually just creates like a surgical effect without touching. So it's kind of almost pushing that energy from the tip. Fulguration is going to give you a little bit more surface level clinical effect, whereas desiccation really goes deeper. So that's why they might use that. Maybe a surgeon is looking to really spread that electrosurgical effect a little deeper. They would ask for desiccation. I mean, how often does it happen? Do you guys get anybody?
Wait, where's the mode for desiccation? I didn't even know that they had that.
Should be right here.
Oh.
Fulgurate, spray, soft. Let's see what's under. There it is.
Yeah, we've never actually changed the
Yeah.
mode. We've never changed the mode.
No?
Well, we didn't know about this one, but the other one, I don't think we had it.
So cut has pure and blend.
Mm-hmm.
And then the standard modes on coag have fulgurate, spray, and soft.
Yeah, we don't have desiccate.
No desiccation.
Yeah, I don't see that. I think it is there somewhere, but I don't see it right now. So, but anyway. So that's that. Okay, so getting into a little bit of the technology that's in the box. I don't want to bore you guys, but one of the cool things is, so those triads, why did we move to this? It's a good question. We were just talking about how we like the triads. There are some nice, simple things about it, right? However, this is far more intelligent from a tissue sensing position. So that was one of the things that Valley Lab developed, was tissue sensing, especially with ligature. You know, it has that stopping point which surgeons love. They can feel confident that when they get those end tones, that the vessel is sealed, right? Well, that all goes back to tissue sensing. That's what that technology is doing. It's actually reading the intended tissue, and it's making calculations and doing the algorithms that are built in there. But getting back to my point, the triad did that, but only did it about 1,300 sensations per second. Sounds like a lot. This one is 434,000 sensations per second. So it's just that much more precise, and it's making decisions that much quicker. And like, see why that's important. You're going through tissue, and you're hitting different tissue thicknesses, different densities, and we can't see them necessarily, but the machine can sense that, and it can deliver consistent energy that way. So that's what it's all about, is just giving consistent energy delivery, so that you don't have those extremes where it senses a thicker tissue and then it pops, or if you're in thicker tissue and you move into thinner tissue, all of a sudden that energy that you have set up, the power level, is way too high for that thin tissue, right? That's dangerous for the patient. This is doing some of that tissue sensing to make sure that you don't have that. So, obviously, patients are part of the equation too, because we're not all built the same. So this kind of gets into what we were going to talk about. You were asking about. Actually, we'll come back to it, but that's part of the whole conversation that I was saying. We're not all built the same, so energy delivery needs to be consistent, even though it changes. So bipolar. So bipolar is by far the safest thing that we can use. It makes sense that we use bipolar in very small incision, very, like I'm thinking vascular surgeons where everything's very small. So you need less energy because it's over a smaller area. And in this case, with bipolar, we all know you don't need a grounding pad anymore because you have your two poles. your two electrodes, your two active electrodes, and it can vary. Like maybe the left one is the active electrode, and then the other one, the other side, the right, functions as the pad. Doesn't matter, it changes back and forth, but between the two, you have that focused energy, which makes it really, really safe. And that brings us to vessel sealing versus bipolar. What is the difference? Like when somebody says, oh, I need a ligature here, what is ligature doing that's different from bipolar? So it comes down to bipolar is electrosurgery still. It's just essentially what we're doing, but it's using a pad and a pencil in the forks of the instrument, right? Ligature is different. It's using RF energy from the machine, and it is actually delivering that energy into the jaws of ligature using that compression, and it's denaturing the collagens to create a permanent flexible seal. So one of the analogies to think about, it's kind of makes sense actually, is a hard-boiled egg. If you break an egg, it just runs everywhere, right? But if we put it in boiling water for 20 minutes, it's going to be hard-boiled. It's kind of what we're doing with vessels, with ligature. It's denaturing it and creating that permanent flexible hold, like a hard-boiled egg. Does that make sense? Kind of a weird analogy, but so this is kind of what that looks like, obviously. So in the past, what did they have to do? I mean, it was like suture, cut, right? Yeah, forever. So now we don't have to do that. The knife blade is there for you. It's so fast, and it's really, really safe. We're indicated up to including 7 millimeters. So it's a pretty big vessel if you think about it. I always get a little nervous when I see one that big. But yeah, basically going back to what I just talked about, it's just taking that, the jaws of the instrument, applying pressure, the RF energy, denaturing the collagen. You can see what it looks like. Here it's all organized nicely, like you would hope. And then after ligature gets in there, it's a completely different deal. It's disorganized, but you get that permanent seal. So this kind of gets to what you were asking about finally. So injury prevention. So 40,000 burns per year caused by electrosurgery. So that's still happening. It's still a thing. Obviously, it's $600 million year liability. So big deal for hospitals. So it's good to have these things in mind. Fortunately, we do have a lot of the safety things at play that reduce that risk significantly. Let's see, so what do they say here? 67% of these reports to the FDA were in the head and neck surgery due to the increased exposure to oxygen. So they probably had a flame. So this acts as an ignition source, and then if you have oxygen, that's your fuel, right? So kind of dangerous situation there, but fires account for 8% of the severe injuries or deaths reported to the FDA for energy-based surgical devices. So, still a risk. So, I'm not going to get into this too far because we already talked about it. It's the return electrode monitoring. That's what this is doing. It's just making sure that it's stuck on and it's stuck on well, and if it starts to come off, it'll let you know. It's going to beep red and it's going to tell you. I honestly can't speak to the megapads. I don't know. This cord, kind of going off script here, but this cord actually bypasses that technology. And I don't know how that works. Medtronic Valley Lab, we kind of don't stand by that technology because this is the safest way to do it because you're actually monitoring pad quality. But the way that works is you have enough contact on the pad that you're getting the same effect, right? So it works. So a couple different things. I guess they used to warm these in the past because they're cool or something, but don't do that. Don't stick it in the microwave or oven.
Also cool.
Yeah, and it's that hydrogel, right? Which is actually a nice thing. Yeah, it's not a bad thing. So they also used to cut them down the sides.
Oh,
Definitely don't do that. Don't want to cut it.
Oh my goodness.
So you have a smaller patient. Don't overlap the edges either. Like don't stick it on itself. Bad idea. Apply after positioning. That makes sense, right? You wouldn't do it before you have the patient positioned because once you position them, it could totally change the situation and
Yeah.
contact quality. So yeah, it's good after they're positioned. Put sustained pressure on the pad site. Prep the site with flammable solutions. Yeah, don't want to do that, right? And then allow liquid to get between the pad and the patient. So sometimes that can happen, I guess, right? Depending on what's going on. So you want to watch for that. If you know that you have this stuck and your operative site is pretty close to it,
Like for
it's a
TRT
concern.
sometimes, like
So you want to be aware that you're not introducing that. The other thing at play there is sweat, right? Patients get hot. Sweat can impact that as well. So, different placements. So, clean, dry skin is the best spot. Large, well-perfused muscle mass areas, and then a convexing area, right? Not a concave. Where do you guys usually stick pads? Thigh, yeah, makes sense, right? It's concaving, it's dry, it's large, muscle
flank
there.
sometimes.
Yeah, same deal.
Not in bony prominence.
There it is, bony prominences. Scar tissue is another bad one. If you see a scar, yep, hairy,
Not
not a good spot. And then what was the last time I missed it?
prosthetic.
Prosthetic, yep. Yeah. I don't know that this one mentions it, but we used to talk about tattoos too. If we can avoid tattoos, sometimes that's hard with certain patients. But some of the tattoo ink, like I've heard this, I don't 100% know if it's true, but I've heard it. Like red ink has iron in it.
The what?
The red ink has iron in
the
it,
ink.
potentially. So I don't know. But if you can avoid it, it counts as scar tissue in a way too, right? A little bit. And then using the appropriate pad size for the intended patient. So we obviously 30 pounds and above is what you would be using. Infant less, and then we have neonatal pads too. So. Oh yeah, pulling this off. It's kind of common sense, right? You're not just gonna. That'd be pretty harsh. Especially with older patients, you want to support that skin if you can. So holding the skin as you're peeling it away is a nice way because it sticks on pretty good. You could tear skin or cause some kind of injury. And then, have you ever had a patient with where you pull it off and it's red for a while? Does that ever come up?
It's red.
Yeah, red underneath.
Not. Yeah. Sometimes there's irritation.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So some patients might be a little allergic to the hydrogel, but it resolves within an hour, so it should go away. But you always want to inspect the site too, right? Just to make sure that there was no injury done. These are some different things, like if we're talking about like lap electrodes or different types of monopolar devices where you could have unintended energy delivery. So a couple that I don't think you would see too often, but so like some of the common injuries, the active electrode, obviously, if you just unintending to put that somewhere on tissue that shouldn't be, like you hit the bowel or something like that, it's kind of an obvious one. Insulation failure, so if you're using like a reprocessed device or heaven forbid, one of our devices coming from the factory has a nick in it, and that insulation is compromised, energy could escape through a crack in an instrument. But yeah, reprocessed is probably where you'd see that more often. So you want to take a good look at your instruments to make sure that that sealing is still good. Direct coupling, that's the other one that you might see. And you see surgeons do that from time to time, like they'll take a metal instrument and then they'll apply the cautery to it, right? And then it runs down to the
forceps.
Yeah, the forceps, exactly. Totally fine to do that, but if you're accidentally doing it and all of a sudden, you're delivering energy to another instrument that's just happens to be touching it, that's a problem, right? So that's actually it. Do you guys have any questions?